Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. So today, excuse me, we are going to have a breakdown of Act 3. This is going to be the content of the story. We're not going to really dig too deep into any of the study guide questions that you're working on or anything like that. This is just so we can understand the story a little bit better if I explain it in my words of all the key elements. Now, I have a PDF version of the story here. It's just so you have something to look at. I'm not going to stick with each page as we go. But so far, we're going to start with Act 3, Scene 1. And what's going to happen here is outside in Verona, Mercutio and Romeo and Benvolio are all going to meet. And they're waiting for Romeo for this to take place. Well, unfortunately, Tybalt arrives first. Okay, Tybalt arrives before Romeo does and starts a fight with Mercutio. Okay, and remember, Tybalt is upset that Romeo snuck into the party, the Capulet party, and is trying to find Romeo to pretty much punish him for that, right? Well, during this time, Romeo arrives with the rest of his friends to see this fight taking place. Romeo arrives and he tells Tybalt, I have no ill will for the Capulets. Remember, right? He just married Juliet. No one knows about it. But he tells Tybalt, I have no quarrels with the Capulets. I have no issues. I was invited to the party type deal. I didn't go there to cause any trouble. But Tybalt's not really listening. He doesn't believe him. And so therefore, Mercutio challenges Tybalt to a duel. When he draws his sword and begins to attack him, Romeo tries to get in the middle of it to stop it. Remember, if you're caught fighting from either side of these families, it was punishable by death. Romeo is thinking he's doing the right thing by trying to break up this brawl. Excuse me. Mute this. By trying to break up this brawl. And in doing so, he is restraining Mercutio, or holding him back to get him out of the fight. And during this restraintment, Tybalt stabs Mercutio and flees the scene. Now, Mercutio is mortally wounded from this stab wound, and it is later revealed that he dies from it. Romeo vows his revenge against Tybalt. And they later meet towards the end of the scene. And see right here, Benvolio reports that Mercutio is dead. And Romeo is going to vow his revenge on Tybalt. They reappear, or Tybalt reappears, and Romeo and Tybalt fight. Or duel, excuse me. And Romeo wins. Romeo kills Tybalt in the streets. Now, Benvolio warns him that the prince is coming. He's on his way. And so Romeo flees. When the prince arrives, he sees this body in the street and obviously wants to know what happens. And so Benvolio explains the entire story. Now, the Montague and Capulet families also arrive with the prince. And so when the story of exactly what happened, the entire story, going back from Tybalt attacking Mercutio, the prince still refuses, or the prince still puts blame on Romeo's part. He still blames him for the death of Tybalt, saying that just because he was acting in revenge doesn't make it okay. And therefore banishes Romeo from Verona and insists that if he doesn't listen and he comes back, he will be put to death. Okay, and that's everything we need to know for scene 1 of Act 3. Let's get to scene 2 of Act 3. Okay, scene 2 jumps over to Juliet. Now, this right here that you're looking at, let's see if I can highlight it, yeah. This right here, oh, of course I can't scroll, nonetheless, is one of the most beautiful and elegant soliloquies throughout the whole story, maybe even in all of Shakespeare's writing. Now, again, go back to what is a soliloquy, right? It's the inner monologue of a character, only we hear it. And what the soliloquy is about her love and how she feels about Romeo. Okay, and she's in her room, and then the nurse appears. Get rid of that. There we go. And the nurse appears. And now the nurse enters and kind of like, in a strange way, explains what just went down. She doesn't necessarily speak clearly and is kind of confusing because she is so distraught of what happened. And so because of this confusing explanation of what took place, Juliet only hears or only understands that someone is dead and someone is banished. And so she doesn't know who's which, and she assumes Romeo is dead. And the nurse doesn't quite explain to her that she's wrong. Now, we know that the nurse likes Romeo and thinks he's a good man and is going to treat Juliet right, and that's why she agreed to help them get married. But why wouldn't the nurse explain to Juliet now that Romeo is not dead when she believes he is, when she knows that Tybalt's the one dead? Well, she's upset. And it should be safe to assume that, Tybalt is a member of the Capulet family. She is the nurse for the Capulet family. She practically raised these children. It's safe to assume that maybe the nurse is upset at the loss of someone that she was close to, that she cared about. But soon, Juliet realizes, or comes to learn, that Romeo is not dead. Okay, so the nurse does reveal that Romeo is not dead. In fact, Tybalt was killed, but Romeo is banished. And so Juliet is upset at first. She's upset at the fact that how could her husband be a murderer, right? How could he have killed someone? How could he have acted violent? And so she starts to question, is it fair for me to speak ill of my husband? But then she kind of goes back on that, questioning of why her husband would do such a thing when he promised and spoke so much of peace. She starts to think about life without him. And she says she can't live without him in numerous of ways. Let's see here, right here. Will you speak well of him that killed your cousin? The nurse asked, right? And she says, shall I speak ill of him that is my husband? Oh, poor my lord, what tongue shall smooth thy name when I, thy 3 hours wife, have mangled it? And so she questions, do I speak ill of my husband, or do I not, because he is in fact my husband? And it's kind of a hard thing to do. She loves him, yet he ended up killing her cousin, and it's a hard thing to overcome. But she eventually does, and she sticks to Romeo's side. And the nurse promises she will find Romeo for him, for Juliet. Now she knows that Romeo is hiding with Friar Lawrence, and so she promises to, promises to bring Juliet to her bedside that night. And Juliet says, well, when you do find him, give him, and she hands him a ring, so that Romeo can wear this ring when he comes to see her. Okay, we'll stop here, and we'll do the remaining acts on a separate video.